Welcome back to the Missing 411 podcast. Today, we're diving deep into a region that, for a long time, has stood as an unsettling anomaly in the study of the missing, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Back at the start of 2025, we began looking into the missing 411 disappearances here in the Keystone State. There were a couple of reasons that drew us to this specific geography. One was simply to see what these kinds of cases would look like in an area with which we were more familiar. But the other reason was the one that really got us interested, the core anomaly. In the Missing 411 books, Paulides generally gives lists of the missing, grouped by state or region. Pennsylvania, however, has no list. It just has the chilling line: the whole state is a cluster. The Keystone State is the largest cluster in the book at a whopping 39 cases. Over the last several months, we found that, for the most part, the pattern seems non-existent, involving mundane cases of children who wandered off. There were certainly a couple of genuinely puzzling ones, like the girl found in plain sight along a rural highway that had been searched multiple times. But the pattern truly breaks down when you examine the cases involving older teenagers and grown adults. A 3-year-old probably can't articulate how they went missing, but a 15-year-old can. It's easy to understand how a 7-year-old might get lost in a trailless section of the woods. But it's far less plausible when the missing person is a 37-year-old on an established hiking path. The cases of missing adults in Pennsylvania are by far the most intriguing, often suggesting a darker human element. In some of these cases, law enforcement made strange decisions that didn't match up with procedure or even common sense. In others, the disappearance left behind so few clues that even the FBI would have struggled to track down the answers. These are the cases where it's abundantly clear that whatever happened, it was the work of some kind of monster, be it human or otherwise. We start with a case from 1968, where two narratives seem to exist for the same event: Karen Cooney. 15-year-old Karen was hanging laundry out to dry in Corey, a small town in northwestern Pennsylvania. At about 11 a.m., her mother and her 2 teenage brothers heard her screaming from the backyard. Karen's brothers ran to the backyard, but she was nowhere to be found. The mother, Mildred Cooney, immediately called her husband, and they notified state police. The area is surrounded by dense forests and swampy woodland, making a thorough search difficult and demanding significant manpower. Troopers and hundreds of volunteers, aided by bloodhounds and a plane, searched for hours. The FBI was quickly involved, likely because the New York state line is just 2 miles from the Cooney home, suggesting a possible interstate kidnapping. Everyone was surprised. Then, when Karen turned up just a half-mile from where she was last seen, near Leisure Lake, she was spotted from a helicopter and found in good condition, appearing to be in a slight state of shock, but otherwise healthy. She was also surprisingly free of scratches and mud, considering she had spent 27 hours wandering through the woods. This is where the story gets twisted. Police were operating under a kidnapping assumption based on the half-choked scream and scuff marks in the grass. But once Karen turned up, they quickly changed their tune, publicly dismissing her account. A trooper told the press she took her time. She could have come out of there yesterday, but she didn't. The police claimed she was high-strung and decided to take a walk. Karen's own mother found this hard to believe, as Karen often walked in the woods and never left without permission. Karen's account was very different. She remembered being chased from the house by a very big man with a knife. We also have to consider the fact that 2 other girls, Edith McGregor and Sheila Oldak, had vanished in the same 2-day span in the vicinity. Sheila, like Karen, was recovered alive and described being abducted and held prisoner by a large man. Could this be a case of a predator? Or was there something in those Erie County woods that prompted law enforcement's immediate, aggressive cover-up of the victim's own words? We've seen this in other missing 411 cases. A person found in plain sight that perhaps they were not simply lost, but held captive by a force they couldn't articulate. We'll leave that unsettling possibility hanging for now and move on. Decades earlier, in 1932, Philadelphia gave us another strange case of a missing young woman. Elsie Flomere, the 22-year-old daughter of a reverend. Elsie was last seen alive in late February in the Fox Chase neighborhood. Her father let her out of the car so she could walk through Burholm Park. When she failed to show up at their rendezvous point, her father went back to trace her path, but couldn't locate her. The search lasted only 24 hours and ended tragically with the discovery of Elsie's body lying face downward in a ditch near a blackberry thicket. The official conclusion was shocking and swift. Exposure and exposure alone was the cause of death. Police surmised that Elsie, who had a documented history of mental health struggles, had suffered some sort of mental lapse while walking. Her father, surprisingly, agreed. But the details surrounding her body were grotesque and contradictory. The Inquirer reported her body was found nude, save for a flimsy silken girdle, cruelly scratched by brambles. Her clothing was found strewn about, leading police to surmise a strange sequence of stripping, running, and succumbing to the cold. This mental lapse theory is challenged by a neighbor who reported hearing a blood-curdling scream several hours after Elsie disappeared, followed by the neighborhood dogs howling all night. Another neighbor said she had seen a man walking from the field late that same night. Furthermore, the papers couldn't agree on her injuries. While one report stated there was nothing to indicate she had been choked, another described her thighs bearing deep cuts and scratches. These were said to resemble fingernail marks, not just briars. The final, and perhaps most bizarre, attempt at an explanation came from a psychologist who attributed the whole thing, and I am not making this up, to moon madness. He theorized the full moon shining overhead caused her to completely lose her reason and undress. But we must consider the human factor. The two teenage boys who found her had a shack nearby, and one of them was on record saying, "Pretty soon we'll hear about that girl disappearing." It strongly suggests a cover-up to dismiss a probable crime, perhaps protecting the true culprits. However, there is a recurring theme in missing 411 cases where clothing is removed from the victim with great care. Was this truly a human crime? Or was the official narrative of moon madness a clumsy attempt to explain a victim who was affected by a bizarre energy in that small park, perhaps a localized burst of paranormal activity? Our next case involves a man whose disappearance is one giant question mark. Dwayne Scott. In 1978, Dwayne, a 31-year-old with mental disabilities, disappeared while on a field trip to Camp Tree Farm in rural Beaver County. He left his cabin around 9 p.m. to use the bathroom and was never seen alive again. The search was extensive, but fruitless. Dwayne's family found the idea that he would have run away or hitched a ride to be utterly impossible. He was terrified of darkness and water, and always relied on others for direction, making an unsupervised wander into the woods unbelievable. The confusion intensified when Dwayne's decomposed body turned up months later, in October, 2 miles from the camp, half a mile up a steep hillside. The coroner found no evidence of foul play, no broken bones, no ligature marks. And yet, there was absolutely no way to explain how he got there. His sister said searchers couldn't have made it to where he was without having their skin torn off, due to the dense thicket of thorn bushes and the steep, rugged terrain. Most bizarrely, Dwayne's clothes were found completely intact, without a single rip or tear anywhere on them. This is physically impossible for a person to accomplish without assistance after hiking through such a brutal environment. His mother concluded, "I think somebody took him around a road in a car and took him in there. But how was a grown man carried through an impenetrable wall of thorn bushes without damaging his clothing, or murdered without leaving any sign of violence?" This is where we consider the truly non-human elements of missing 411. The terrain itself seems to preclude a normal explanation. Could Dwayne have stumbled into an unseen gateway, perhaps a minor dimensional rift, only to be deposited, confused, at the top of that ridge? If he was removed and replaced by forces beyond human sight, his clothing would be immaculate, and he would have no memory of the bizarre event. The terrain, therefore, is not the killer, but the signpost of a killer that operates outside of our understanding of physics. The most intriguing case we covered is that of Michael Malinowski, a psychologist who disappeared in 1996. Paulides made a major geographical mishap in the book, but the facts remain chillingly sparse. He checked into a lodge near Pine Creek Gorge and called his roommate, leaving a message whose content remains sealed. Days later, Michael's rented Nissan Sentra was found at a trailhead. Inside, police found his jacket, an unzipped day pack, and most crucially, his tan rubber-soled bean boots. Law enforcement assumed he parked and went for a hike. But the search was fruitless. No scent, no trail, no sign of a fall. The forest ranger eventually told the press that the chance Michael was in the area they searched was 0. The car was deemed staged. Michael's roommate, Greg Rossi, provided the key evidence, noting several things were entirely out of character. The heat was left on in his cabin, which Michael never did, and his car was parked strangely. Rossi most strongly emphasized that Michael would never have gone hiking in the sneakers he was presumably wearing, leaving his proper hiking boots in the car. "It just doesn't fit," Rossi insisted, suggesting his friend had been intercepted before he even started his hike. Rossi was 95% certain Michael didn't park the car and believed he was apprehended by somebody he knew. The victim was a gentle soul, devoted to his son, with no known enemies, and actively planning a move to Seattle. Here is the massive puzzle. Why did Rossi and Michael's sister, Jane Stweeke, only ever speak to the Elmira Star-Gazette, a small-town paper in a different state? They actively refused to speak to the major papers in Pennsylvania. This strange, restrictive media strategy is highly suspicious, especially when they publicly stated they wanted to jog witnesses' memories. It suggests they were trying to control the narrative or actively suppress a certain detail from reaching a wider audience. Rossi also believed the scene was staged, pointing to the unzipped bag containing Michael's work cell phone. He would have locked that up. The complete lack of evidence, no scent, no struggle, is unnatural. This case is so baffling that we have to step back. What if Michael was not killed, but removed? The local cryptid known as the Pennsylvania Bigfoot is sometimes associated with strange disappearances and staged scenes, known as curated events. The complete lack of evidence, the staging of the car with the boots left inside, and the restrictive media campaign strongly suggest that someone or something was playing a game with the investigation. The staging is a calling card of a force that is playing a game with the police. The possibility remains that Michael was taken by a non-human intelligence, a classic alien abduction scenario that leaves no trace of struggle and may only leave behind a staged vehicle. The official investigation became trapped in a labyrinth of half-truths and manufactured evidence. The most logical, human theory is that Michael was hiding something, perhaps the nature of his relationship with Rossi, and revealed it to the wrong person in that isolated area. This personal connection could have been the motive for a crime of passion or hate. But even this human theory is undermined by the total absence of evidence. The terrain swallows the evidence of this missing 411 case whole, leaving us with only the chilling final words of Greg Rossi. He stated, "As it stands now, I could not concoct a better script for Robert Stack and Unsolved Mysteries, and that, unfortunately, is the perfect summary for the entire Pennsylvania cluster. The cluster presents a perfect dichotomy. You have the many children who likely just got lost, though their locations were odd. And then you have the completely inexplicable adult cases that defy all logical or forensic explanation. Is the size of the Pennsylvania cluster a result of high population density next to vast wildlands? Or does the size and the bizarre nature of the adult cases point to a continuous, active threat in the region? Whether it is a hidden serial predator, the work of a local cryptid, or something even more terrifying like a dimensional rift drawing individuals from these isolated regions, the common thread is the same. The truth is actively obscured. The evidence is either contradicted or non-existent, and the victims are never truly found. They are simply gone. And the authorities are left with little choice but to classify the disappearances as unusual, knowing they have been robbed of the ability to find answers. We'll continue to pursue the truth behind these massive missing 411 clusters, looking for the threads of consistency that the official reports deliberately overlook. Thank you for listening to the Missing 411 podcast. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the unexplained wilderness of America's forests. Until then, stay safe out there.